I think we'll move on and we'll introduce our second speaker this morning, Ludwig Hermann from Proman Consulting, who's also an active and indeed president of the board of the European Sustainable Phosphorus Platform. But in particular, Ludwig this morning is going to address one of the key issues facing all of us as we interact as stakeholders in the emerging circular economy and in the context of nutrient sustainability. And that is the area of regulation and regulatory frameworks and some of the challenges and opportunities that they present to us, and probably plenty of challenges, to be fair, as well as opportunities. So you're very welcome, Ludwig. Thank you very much for your time and participation this morning, and I'll open the floor to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here and giving me the opportunity to continue our part European Sustainable Phosphorus Platform and part Proman presentation. I have to say that Chris and I work together at the European Sustainable Phosphorus Platform, and a large part of the presentation you will see is compiled by Chris. So it should give you further insight into what the European Sustainable Phosphorus Platform is doing. Let's first start with a short review about the reasons why we are doing our activities. First is the great acceleration. We extract more resources than Earth can supply. And if you look at the graphs, you see that particularly from the 1960s, the real acceleration started after we have seen more or less 10,000 years of civilization development without any substantial economic growth and extraction, large-scale extraction of minerals. We have achieved a short period of decoupling, meaning that we achieved an economic growth without growth of energy use and materials use, but this has gone now, and we are back to the acceleration pathway, except now, for example, for the COVID-19 reasons. We deteriorate our water quality and aquatic life by losing nutrients to water bodies. And we consume and pollute more than the biosphere can tolerate. And this holds particularly true for phosphorus and nitrogen. And we don't know when a tipping point may be reached where we could expect not only gradual but also abrupt environmental change. However, we cannot live without fertilizers. We need to apply them, and probably only half of our population could be fed without Haber-Bosch, and only 1/5 without mineral phosphate fertilizers. So we need fertilizers. The solutions are, of course, policies, prices on externalities, strategies to avoid waste, practices to avoid nutrient losses, nutrient recovery and recycling, and essentially a transition from a material-based to a service-based economy that doesn't use so many materials. And this is essentially what we are contributing to. And the European Commission, in response to these challenges, has issued a consultative communication on the sustainable use of phosphorus in 2014. In 2015 has presented a circular economy package, and in 2019 has published a new fertilizing products regulation, to which we as a European Sustainable Phosphorus Platform have continuously contributed on behalf of our members. So the fertilizing products regulation is the flagship of this circular economy package so far, and it replaces the regulation 2003. You see, it has been now, or it will be in total almost 20 years governing the use and the typology of fertilizers. It is revolutionary in the sense that it is the first EU legislation to confer an end of waste status. It is intended to open free European market for CE marked products. The compliance is optional, so you can still have national fertilizers to be defined and to be in use. And it regulates the products, not the use and not the mode of application. The European Parliament and Council decide all the essential elements. The Commission can adopt delegated act. You have notified bodies in every country to conform confirm the conformity of products. The SEN has been asked to adopt harmonized standards, and you have market surveillance authorities to check the fertilizing products, and you have economic operators to ensure the conformity. You have different chapters. I will not go through all the chapters. You can read them, and you can, as I believe you will have access to the presentation, you can go through in detail in the end. And you have altogether 5 annexes. Annex 1 to determine the product function categories. Annex 2 to determine the component material categories. Annex 3 for the labeling requirements. Annex 4 for conformity assessment procedures. And Annex 5, the EU Declaration of Conformity. And here you can see in a overall graphic layout what it means. You have 7 product function categories: fertilizer, liming material, soil improver, and so on, with different subcategories like organic and inorganic. And this is one of the main differences between the previous and the current fertilizing products regulation, that you have now inorganic and organic products regulated in one legal act. Of course, the CE marked products must conform with the requirements, with safety requirements, with quality requirements, with labeling requirements, and you may have CE marked products with more product functions that are considered as a plant. And these products with these determined functions can be produced from a set of component materials. We have currently 11 component material categories in the regulation. And of course, the products must also comply with REACH, end of waste criteria, and animal byproducts. And the different components are not expected to react intentionally. So you see here the list of component materials already in the regulation, And you have here now the so-called strobias component materials 12, 13, and 14 that are relevant particularly for the recycled products. And the Commission has delegated, may include this already because it is entitled to do so to the fertilizing product regulation, and this is expected for Q1 2021. And category 12 refers to precipitated phosphate, salts, and derivatives, for example, struvite, but also calcium phosphates. Category 13 is thermal oxidation materials and derivatives, so essentially ash-derived products. And 14 is for pyrolysis and gasification materials like biochar. But biochar must not be derived from sewage sludge, only from other organic materials. This is a large overview of the fertilizing product regulation. Now we come to the national policies. And first, to give you, we have 2 countries currently that have made phosphorus recycling obligatory. One is Germany and one is Switzerland. And starting from Germany, that has adopted legislation in 2017, and at this point it produced approximately 1.8 million tons of sewage sludge dry matter, of which about 70% was incinerated. It produced about 200 to 220 million cubic meters of manure and digestate, essentially used on cropland, and it imported about 2 million tons of manure and digestate from the Netherlands. So Germany had a problem with groundwater and still has it. So the European Commission filed a contract infringement claim against Germany for non-compliance with the nitrate directive. And this, and in response to this contract infringement procedure, Germany had to adopt a bunch of new regulatory acts. One is a new Düngegesetz that was amended, and it essentially regulates the farm gate nutrient balance. Then a new fertilizer ordinance that was also amended recently, and it regulates the fertilizing practices, including sewage sludge and also ash-derived, sludge ash-derived recycling products. And it contains partly more stringent pollutant limits than the European Fertilizing Product Regulation. And then you have the Fertilizer Application Ordinance, redefining very restrictively the fertilizer application practices. So in essence, the whole territory of Germany has been declared a nitrate sensible zone, and the nitrate directive has been fully transposed to the national legislation, but with further restrictions than the European nitrate directive. And the phosphorus recycling is regulated by the so-called Abfallklärverordnung, so the sewage sludge regulation, and it says that within 12 or 15 years you have to you have to implement bee recycling for all wastewater treatment plants with 100,000 or later in 2032, 50,000 people equivalent. And these wastewater treatment plants are not allowed any further to use sewage sludge or to apply sewage sludge to cropland. And it is so all sewage sludge with more than 2% P dry matter content are concerned. You have to recover more than 50% from sludge, or you have to reduce the residual P concentration to less than 2%, and you have to recover 80% from ash. Sludge use, apart from this regulation for the larger plants, has generally been banned from use on grassland, forestry, and vegetable cultivation. And also, the regulation has introduced the allowance for sludge application on corn and sugar beet fields. Coming to Switzerland, Switzerland has introduced this regime recovery obligation in 2016 already. And at this point, it produced about 200,000 million tons of sewage sludge, again dry matter, of which 100% was and is incinerated. And you have 11 mono incinerators, so-called mono incinerators, because they combust sewage sludge only, and they cover about 55% of the Swiss sewage sludge production, and 45% are incinerated in cement plants and waste incinerators. The direct agricultural use of sewage sludge is banned since 2006 already, but Switzerland is lucky in not having issues with manure and digestate because a low livestock density. There are essentially two pieces of regulation in Switzerland. One is the 2016 Waste Act, where Article 15 says you have to recover phosphate by 2026, so you have a 10 years transition period. It's very simple because it's only 3 paragraphs. It says you have to recycle P from P-rich wastewater, sludge and sludge ash, and also from meat and bone meal, which is not obligatory in Germany because the regulation refers to sewage sludge. The Swiss regulation refers to waste in general. And if recycled P is used as a fertilizer, the product needs compliance with Appendix 6 of the Chemical Products Risk Reduction Ordinance, which has been recast in 2018, and it includes now a new fertilizer category called MINREC, with requirements to inorganic recycled fertilizers, because the organic recycled fertilizers were already regulated by this Chemical Risk Reduction Act. And there have been environmental targets agriculture jointly developed by Swiss stakeholders. The regulation is as low as reasonable achievable in terms of pollutants that are allowed to be transferred to the soils, and they must not exceed pollutants transferred from the soil to other media. So this is quite a very simple approach. That leads, however, to very low limit values, as you can see from this table. So in the left column, you see all pollutants are referred to per milligram, per kilogram of P, in milligram per kilogram of P. So pollutant concentration always depend on your P content that you have in the fertilizer. And on the right side, you see an example. If you have 25% P, which is of course a very high P concentration, refers to the DAP, for example, produced from recycled phosphates. But you still see, if you compare this to other regulations, and including the European regulation, it's very strict. Switzerland has a quantitative P recovery goal of 75%, but does not, like Germany, determine you need to recover 50% from sludge and 80% from ash. So they have an overall target. If you come to national policies beyond these two countries, we have in Austria, that is usually following Germany with several years later. You have a waste management plan that says we will recover, or we will make nutrient recovery obligatory. In Denmark, different approach. So all the other countries currently do not have an obligation to recycle nutrients, but they have other government tools to exercise some influence on the practices. Like Denmark, for example, they have a unique tax on P effluents from sewage plants. So if you have a stormwater overflow, for example, you pay more if you cannot control your low nutrient effluent limits that we have in wastewater treatment plants, and you have a landfill tax, quite a substantial one. Finland has just an overall goal to become the world leader in circular economy by 2025. Sweden has had a government inquiry about the ban on spreading sewage sludge, but it did not result in a ban, but in a better controlled quality system, or they have already for several years a quality control system for sewage sludge use. And yes, they aim at toxin-free and resource-efficient ecocycles. And Netherlands has mostly voluntary agreements. The good thing in the Netherlands, if you have voluntary agreements, many stakeholders participate. And again, they aim at peer recycling, and you have a lot of ongoing activities in the Netherlands, and you also have a landfill tax. A few words to implementation. You can see this table, what is in and what is out of the of coverage of the European Fertilizing Products Regulation. So you see by different waste flows, sewage, manure, animal byproducts, food and bio-waste, and you can see where in which component material category it is included and not included. And you see, for example, that animal byproduct category 1 is completely excluded. Sewage is excluded from compost and digestate, and so CMC3, CMC5, and CMC6. And you have component material category 11 that is still undefined. So this is still under development to determine the products that are part of CMC 11. So the Commission has in July published a guidance on labeling. As I said already, the structure's materials should be included in Q1 21. The harmonized standards are, so Commission has requested SEM to develop harmonized standards, and this is ongoing, but will take some time. And you have a frequently asked questions document that is made available by the Commission, and you can, it's really accessible, so you can always look into this format and see what are the questions and answers by the Commission. During the next years, because the regulation will be fully implemented only in July 2022, so there will be criteria on agronomic efficiency. Then we have an ongoing discussion about biodegradation for polymers. This is also under development. It's not yet determined. And you have animal byproduct derived products that are for which endpoints have to be determined. The different models for conformity assessment are defined in Annex 4. So you have D1 to module A being more stricter and needing more proceedings for conformity assessment. You see here the compliance, how to obtain the CE mark. You have to comply with recovery rules. You have to respect the limit of for heavy metals and contaminants and pathogens and so on. Minimum content of nutrients. You have to do a correct labeling. And then on the right side, you see the corresponding conformity assessment. So you can, under these conditions listed in under 1, you can apply the module D1. You have a manufacturer of the product that operates a quality system under surveillance of a notified body. The quality system includes input materials, inspection and output material sample testing, and the CE marking indicates the identification number. So the quality assessment also is done by delegated acts, and the conformity assessment and notified bodies that are currently being determined in the different member states play a role for the modules, particularly regarding the recycled products. Of course, you have interface of the fertilizing product regulation with the waste framework directive, with the animal byproduct regulation, and with the plant protection product regulation. And you have one currently also planned for recast regulation, which is the organic farming and recycled product, so organic farming regulation, where you can use which recycled products you will be able to use for organic farming. And there are already several reports recommending P and N fertilizers or not recommending them for use in organic farming. And well, the fertilizing product regulation opens the pathway for inclusion to the to a recast of the organic farming regulation. That was my overall presentation of the legal framework. of course, as I said, you will have the possibility to read the slides with more details than I could have presented in this half hour. And if you have questions, you are always welcome to address us at the European Sustainable Phosphorus Platform. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ludwig. That's a really comprehensive overview, and I think really useful in terms of the regulatory landscape that's emerging. And again, for the benefit of attendees, if you'd like to flag anything with the